Radio 3 live at 27 minutes past 8 on London's South Bank, celebrating the formation 200 years ago today of the Royal Philharmonic Society. From the stage I've moved to one of the boxes with a panoramic view over both platform and auditorium here at the Festival Hall, and over the next 20 minutes we're going to look at the beginnings of the Royal Philharmonic Society and explore what it does now. Later I'll be looking through the organisation's archive kept at the British Library. First of all, a word from three people with a direct connection to the RPS. Publisher Sally Groves, former chairman Graham Sheffield, and first of all cellist Zoe Martlew.
It's nice to know that there's an organisation out there that really knows about what it means to be a musician and is acknowledging performance and creativity at all levels. So it's nice to know that people who've made incredible achievements in classical music are being acknowledged by the organisation, but also that my contemporaries, composers, their work is also being seen, being heard, being acknowledged by colleagues.
I feel with the RPS that they don't put themselves first, but wherever you look at a new initiative or something where you think, gosh, that's a really good idea, you'll find the RPS there. As far as I'm concerned, the RPS has always been there and always looking after composers. That's incredibly important. I always think of the RPS and Beethoven, and as far as I'm concerned, Beethoven is alive and all composers are like Beethoven. So I think the RPS motto should be Beethoven is alive and well.
It's always been a force for good in music ever since it supported Beethoven and ran its own orchestra and was among the first society to run concerts in London. So I think as it's developed, it's clearly got a great charitable purpose, and I think that's to the good. It's also an independent and very articulate voice for the future of classical music. So I think it's got a multiple purpose in terms of developing understanding for music, promoting musicians, and generally being a voice for the world of classical music.
Graham Sheffield, former chairman of the Royal Philharmonic Society, before him publisher Sally Groves, and cellist and RPS member Zoe Martlew. Well, I'm joined now by Rosmah Johnson, who's executive director of the Royal Philharmonic Society, and the organisation's current chairman, John Gilhooly, who's also director of Wigmore Hall. John, it's amazing that an organisation founded 200 years ago is still such a strong force in music.
Yes, well, it's a magnificent occasion for us here this evening, and we've been inundated all day with congratulations and gratitude from composers and musicians from all over the world, and that's a symbol really of what the Royal Philharmonic Society has achieved over the past 2 centuries. And
when it was started, those first letters of congratulation would have come perhaps hand-delivered. Then there was the penny post. Then there were telegrams, and now they're coming in by Twitter. It is an illustration of how the society has stayed vibrant as times have changed.
Indeed. Well, it was originally formed to knock the cobwebs off a very dull concert scene in London, and it continues to do that. It's an advocate. It's a force for good in the musical world. We work with young composers, with young musicians. For instance, Stephen Hough received a bursary to study at Juilliard from the Society, and that's vital work that we do, as well as giving out some of the most prestigious, most important awards in the live music world.
How much, Rosemary, is it about safeguarding the role of music in the cultural firmament of the country?
Oh, I think that's absolutely the key thing. Philharmonic, music loving, that was a word coined by the original founders of the Society. It was the first time it was used in the English language, and the whole reason the Philharmonic Society is still here is because of the passion of the people, most of whom involved with the Society have never been paid for anything they've done. They've kept it going because they've believed in music and they've believed in the future of music and keeping music vibrant and alive.
It's worth pointing out, John, that everything it does, all these bursaries, all these awards, all these commissions, they're all done with no government subsidy.
Indeed, we're entirely self-sufficient, and we've established a sound financial footing, but obviously we have to look to the future, and we're constantly fundraising and working with donors and organisations, partner organisations, that can help us with our spread both nationally and internationally.
And one of the aims, Rosemary, this year is to get us thinking about that word philharmonic again, isn't it? And start using it as in that original sense.
Yes, I think it's quite a scary word if you don't actually think about the roots about it, what it is. But we're simply music lovers, and if you're a music lover, you should be a member of the Royal Philharmonic Society.
Are you philharmonic, as you are asking people? We'll talk more about what the Society's up to today a little bit later on in our interval this Thursday night. But now let's look back to events of 200 years ago when the Royal Philharmonic Society was formed. Earlier this week I went to King's Cross in London to the British Library to meet the RPS's archivist. Well, I've actually been left alone in a windowless room in the bowels of the British Library, a splendid oil painting of Fort William, Calcutta from the India Office Library on the wall. I'm just waiting for Nicolas Bell, who is a music curator here at the British Library and is on the council of the RPS, who's gone to collect a trolley bearing riches from the RPS's past. A red trolley. What have we got on it, Nicolas?
Well, it's just a small portion of the archive. There are about 400 or 500 volumes on the shelves, but I thought I'd show you just a selection of what there is here, dating right back to the foundation of the Philharmonic Society 200 years ago today. The earliest document we have here is the foundation charter of the Philharmonic Society. Of course, it gained its royal title sometime later. And this is dated slightly later, the 6th of February 1813. In fact, the idea of the society began 2 weeks before that, on the 24th of January, with a meeting in the house of one of the directors, William Dance. And you can see his name is here.
Manchester Street, 17 Manchester Street.
Yes, many of them lived in the West End, in the fashionable new developments around Regent Street.
We, the undersigned professors of music, hereby associate ourselves under the title of the Philharmonic Society and reciprocally engage strictly to obey all its laws. So then the rules and regulations are in here as well, are they?
No, this is only the names. In fact, the rules and regulations, I think you should see straight away. They were printed very soon, and this is a copy of all the regulations, which was owned by one of the founding directors, Sir George Smart, who conducted many of the concerts over a long time. First, there's a sort of advertising leaflet, a flyer explaining the purpose of the society, the want of encouragement which has for many years past been experienced by that species of music which called forth the efforts and displayed the genius of the greatest masters, and the almost utter neglect into which instrumental pieces in general have fallen, have long been sources of regret to the real amateur. So the purpose of this society is to bring to the fore instrumental music, not choral music. That was very well catered for.
The primary object of the Philharmonic Society is the encouragement of the superior branches of music by the establishment of a concert and combining therein the highest talents that can be procured for the purpose of forming a full and complete orchestra. So it was really about making musical performance happen at the highest possible level.
Yes, especially symphonies and orchestral music and big sounds that were well catered for on the continent but not in England. This word philharmonic was invented by them to cover this idea.
And this lovely rule here, the 7 directors, one of whom shall be treasurer, shall be elected on St. Cecilia's Day each year, the day of the patron saint of music. What was the format of their setup? I mean, were they a company taking on financial responsibility of putting on concerts? How did all that work?
Yes, that was the main purpose. The directors met frequently to devise programmes, then they would listen to them privately before allowing their members to hear them in concert. So right from the start they commissioned new works, as of course the Society does to this day.
And if you wanted to come to an RPS concert, you had to be a member of the RPS?
Yes. At first the membership was divided into members and associates. In the original plan, both classes were professors of music, but I think that can be taken in a very broad sense to mean those who profess the goodness of music to the soul.
The list of directors for that first season: Mr. Kramer of Sloane Street, Mr. Corrie of Portman Place, Mr. Dance of Manchester Street, Mr. Kramer of Margaret Street, Mr. Bishop of Longacre, Mr. Ayrton of St. James's Street, Buckingham Gate, and the one name I recognise, Mr. Clementi of 29 Alfred Place, Bedford Square. Clementi made pianos, publisher and performer.
Yes, and in fact all of those people were very well connected in the musical world, not just in London but on the continent as well. So they knew Beethoven and they admired Beethoven right from the start. If we look at the first programmes, the first concert that was open to the members and associates was on Monday, March the 8th, 1813, and already there's some Beethoven. It just says a symphony, it doesn't say which one.
Symphony by Haydn, Mozart choruses, quintet for 2 violins, viola and 2 cellos by Boccherini. Where do these concerts happen?
The concerts took place in the Argyle Rooms, just next to Oxford Circus, right in the centre of the West End. They're no longer there, of course.
Now, what's in this box, Nicolas? May I open it?
Yes, true.
A bag, plastic bag. Gosh, it's sort of ivory tokens.
Yes, each of them's inscribed with the name of
Mr. J.
one
A.
of the
Williams,
directors.
director.
Over many years. And the idea was that this acted as a ticket. If you were a director, you were allowed into all the concerts without paying. And so you could hang this ivory token on your watch chain and just flash it at the man at the door.
There's one for the conductor.
So probably Wagner used this one when he was conducting for his season.
Sir John Goss, director. I tell you, one of the things that occurs to me looking at all of this and looking at the names and looking at the people they commissioned and their links with Europe, it was a very international organisation, wasn't it, right from the beginning?
In fact, there had been a lot of German musicians who were associated with the Hanoverian court. So, yes, right from the beginning, even if we look at that foundation document, many of the names are German. Many of the most prominent musicians of the time had come from Germany. And so these associations with German composers were really quite well established already by the beginning of the 19th century.
What else have we got on the trolley here?
This is a minute book of the early directors' meetings. It's very interesting reading these minutes to see the political rivalries between some of the directors, particularly when they're commissioning new works and deciding how much they're prepared to pay a composer to write a piece. Now, famously, they asked Beethoven to write a symphony and were willing to pay him £50, which isn't very much, really.
So what have we got to do with the ninth?
Right from the start, the directors were very fond of Beethoven's music. He'd written 8 symphonies, and they thought they were in a suitably grand position to commission a 9th symphony from him. I imagine that they were expecting something about the size of the 8th. And then they waited 2 years. He delivered it very late, but just before Christmas in 1824, this manuscript arrived on the doorstep.
This is very exciting to actually have this in my hand.
So this is a neat copy of Beethoven's 9th Symphony. It's a full score written out by 2 or 3 friends of Beethoven who were professional copyists.
With any of his corrections on?
Almost every page there are small corrections.
Whose red markings are these, by the way?
Those are Sir George Smart's markings, because he did conduct it in the end. They tried to get Beethoven over to perform it, but even though they were willing to pay him several times what they'd paid for writing the symphony, he was too frail and unwilling to come over. Now here's a funny conductor's marking, just as the famous tune comes in. It's a long string of semiquavers with a conductor's hand waving, and I think it's a reminder to the conductor that you have to think that there are going to be some fast notes later on. Don't take this famous tune too fast.
And this is from George Smart.
Yes.
So they did very well with Beethoven, and then just a couple of years later they were engaging another great European name.
Yes, Mendelssohn had been associated with the society for a while, and in 1829 he brought this symphony, which, well, we now know it as his first symphony. This symphony in C minor had already been performed, but Mendelssohn was never very satisfied with the minuet and trio. So in the score that he sent the society, he offered them an alternative, which was the scherzo from the octet, and that is what they played at the concert on the 25th of May 1829. And this manuscript is all in Mendelssohn's hand. It's
I love the bar lines that he's done without using a ruler.
It's so neat and systematic. I mean, it's a remarkable...
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it could almost have been engraved. Really amazing treasures. I was talking to Nicolas Bell at the British Library, and I took some pictures, including Beethoven's signature on that score of the Ninth, those wonderful tokens to let you into early RPS concerts. Other things besides, a list of the original members of the Philharmonic Society, which I've tweeted at BBC Radio 3 if you'd like to see them for yourself. John Gilhooly and Rosmah Johnson are still both with me. Rosemary, it's amazing that story of Beethoven 9, and proof of what an international organisation, what a far-ranging in terms of where it looked organisation, the Philharmonic Society, and still to this day the RPS is.
It's astonishing, actually, in this world of Twitter and the internet, that they were so international that they physically went out and got musicians they wanted to appear and brought them back to London to appear. So just amazing. And everything was turned around in a very short time as well, apart from waiting for composers to deliver their manuscripts, of course.
Nothing changes
Nothing
there.
changes.
When did it stop promoting its own concerts with its own orchestra?
Well, it went on through 2 world wars. It became ultimately a victim of its own success. The orchestras burgeoned out of the tradition of the Philharmonic and out of the standards that the Philharmonic Society had. Many of the players went off to form the new orchestras, and of course London's concert scene became incredibly rich, and it was really finally in the 1980s that the Society knew that it was no longer needed as an orchestral promoter, and had a volte-face, took a long, hard look at itself, went back to some of the original passion and vision of the founding directors about the love of music, about new music, and about the upholding of standards for the profession. And that's what we do now.
One of the big events each year is the presentation of the RPS Gold Medal. Give us, John, some recent names and some great names from the past.
Well, Dame Janet Baker, Dame Mitsuko Uchida, and recently deceased Elliot Carter and Dame Joan Sutherland, Placido Domingo, Bernard Haitink, the list goes on. And I've had the privilege of handing over the award a number of times, and it's amazing to see how great musicians, how much they appreciate it, and the gratitude that they show in their speeches afterwards. It really is a much coveted award in the classical music world.
It is just one of the awards that the RPS makes, though. There are other, perhaps more practical awards. You mentioned Stephen Huff and his bursary to Juilliard. Tell us briefly more about those other awards.
Well, the awards that we give to students buying instruments for them, for instance, or providing bursaries for study. And special committees look at that and look at each case and weigh up if we can help these particular individuals.
Well, thank you both very much for being with us tonight at this wonderful gala concert. Rosmah Johnson and John Gilhooly. And let's hear a case study of someone who received one of those RPS awards to finish our interval. The flautist Catherine Bryan, principal flute in the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, released her first concerto disc 2 years ago. She was a recipient of the Julius Isserlis Prize, which gives a student the opportunity to study abroad, as she told me this morning from her base in Glasgow.
I went to study at the Juilliard School in New York, which was absolutely amazing. Juilliard itself completely changed the way that I played and the way I thought about music, and just the people I met there were incredible.
Do you think you'd have had the opportunity to do this without the Isserlis Scholarship?
Definitely not. I mean, it wasn't something that I would have been able to afford to do, but it was something that I definitely really, really wanted to do. Lots of friends of mine were going to study music in London or in Manchester, and I sort of wanted to do something a little bit different. And so my only opportunity really was to get some funding to enable me to do that, and the scholarship absolutely meant that that could happen.
So the RPS, it's fair to say, changed your life?
Absolutely, because I think if I hadn't gone to Juilliard, I really received such a high level of orchestral training, particularly there. So I don't think I would have got the job in the RSNO, and then from that point sort of other doors opened, and it sort of gave me the confidence to pursue things that I really wanted to do.
What's happened to you since your study?
I'm currently principal flute in the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, just about to release my second CD of flute concertos. Quite excited about that.
And tell us about the first disc.
The first disc was the Nielsen Flute Concerto, and a work by Poulenc, the sonata, but it was actually orchestrated by Lennox Berkeley, and they were all recorded with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra.
Catherine Bryan, thank you very much.
Thank you.